sister, inheritance, and promise. Li Shu shut down the ore conveyor belt, put the forklift back in place, checked all the machinery in her work area, rubbed her aching neck, and wearily clocked out. Li Shu shut down the ore conveyor belt, put the forklift back in place, checked all the machinery in her work area, rubbed her aching neck, and wearily clocked out. According to her elder brother, a long time ago, when humans still lived on Earth, assembly line operations were popular in factories. Each worker only needed to be responsible for the small work area in front of them. Only small factories in backward areas still retain the task of one person doing multiple jobs. Although human footprints had spread throughout the Milky Way hundreds of years ago, the Great Collapse still had a profound impact on everyone. The Perseus star region was the last colony to be developed in the domain of man. Many advanced technologies had not yet been implemented there. Humans were full of pride in their ambition to conquer the vast Milky Way, and colonies were everywhere. In those days, these emerging colonies did not store too much technical information locally. Relying on the communication network of the Stargates, any information and technology could be quickly transmitted. No one would have thought that the Stargates would collapse, and no one would have thought that they would lose contact with the solar system. But it did happen. Without the domain of man, the technological decline in today's Perseus is unimaginable. What's more, there are also wars and unrest, and the further loss of technology caused by the decline and fall of many colonies outside the core star regions. What is even more serious than the technological decline is the lack of order. Li Shu alone is responsible for all the processes from ore leaching to purification in a mineral refining production line. The purified metal solution will be loaded into tanks, and depending on the order or material, it will be directly refined or further smelted and purified. These tasks originally required a large number of safety officers and technicians to check constantly, but in individual factories, they are all left to her alone. Faced with such a complex and arduous task, Li Shu dare not complain or protest at all. If she doesn't do it, there are plenty of others who will. As long as she dares to slack off in any way, the factory can recruit a replacement from the street at any time. Li Bin once commented that such crazy exploitation and disregard for production risks were things that even the early industrialization on Earth couldn't achieve. Thinking of her elder brother, Li Shu felt even more exhausted after a tiring day at work. Her elder brother had been away from home for 8 years. Li Shu missed this smart and reliable brother very much. When the factory was on the verge of collapse, their parents gave her the name Li Shu in an attempt to seek something mysterious. Fortunately, I have a younger brother. She put on her gas mask, walked slowly, and comforted herself. Although he eats a lot, he is very reliable. Looking at the other workers on the roadside buying the hard and greasy nutrient paste from the stalls in the corner, heating it up and eating it when they got home, Li Shu straightened her back a little. How could such a thing be called food? What the Li family ate was real food. She missed her elder brother's cooking skills. Li Bin not only taught her how to survive but also how to cook. After Li Bin left, she passed this skill on to Li Changzhen. Thinking that she could eat dried rats with sweet and sour moss nutrient paste when she got home, a faint smile appeared on the girl's face. She even felt that she could already smell the aroma of the food. No. Li Shu stopped in her tracks and looked warily at her home. The Li family used to live in the factory. 3 years ago, when the factory went completely bankrupt and her parents committed suicide, she and her younger brother moved to the place where they live now. It is located on the edge of the factory area, and the house was built directly on the top structural plate. It is far from the engine stack of the space station, with the weakest gravity, which is not convenient for living, and is also the most affected by the polluted gases from the factory. There are quite a few such houses in the entire industrial area, and they are all occupied by poor people. At this distance, she shouldn't be able to smell the aroma from the polluted air, especially since she was still wearing a gas mask. Li Shu pulled out a crowbar from the pocket of her overalls and carefully leaned against the wall. Seeing that the door of her house was wide open and the ventilation system, which was usually reluctant to be turned on, was blowing vigorously, her heart tightened. After confirming that there was no one at the door, she carefully took a few steps forward, took a deep breath to prepare herself, and was about to peek when she heard her younger brother's cheerful laughter. Wow, the nutrient paste can be made like this? It smells so good. Big sister never taught me this. Another gentle voice that she had been longing to hear replied, soak the dried rats, fry them, and then shred them. Mix them with the sweet and sour moss into the nutrient paste, and it becomes a bowl of porridge with meat and vegetables. It's not difficult to make, but I didn't have any oil in my hands back then, so I couldn't teach Li Changzhen. Li Bin, who was carrying the dishes, felt that there was an extra figure at the door. He looked up and immediately laughed. "You're back? Wash your hands and eat." When Li Shu saw that it was really Li Bin, she was first incredulous, and then her eyes turned red. The crowbar slipped from her hand and floated in the air, and then it was knocked flying by her lunging body and hit the wall with a smack. Li Bin, who was hugged tightly by Li Shu, was quick-eyed and quick-handed and covered the steaming hot porridge. Li Changzhen, who was drooling, still didn't forget to shout, "Porridge, porridge. Sister, don't knock over the porridge." Li Bin, who was bumped into the table by his sister, grimaced in pain. "You stupid thing with no sense. Hurry up and take the porridge. Do you want to see your brother and sister disfigured?" At the Li family's dining table, Li Shu, who had cried her heart out, regained her composure, except that her eyes were still swollen. She held the bowl and took a sip, looking at Li Bin from time to time, afraid that she was still dreaming. Li Changzhen, on the other hand, wolfed down 3 bowls, his stomach bulging. Now he was scraping the residue in the bowl with a spoon to satisfy his craving. Li Bin had no appetite for the nutrient paste at all and only ate a little. After listening to Li Shu tell him what had happened in the past few years, he was greatly shocked. "So our parents committed suicide, at least that's the news you know. And the factory doesn't belong to the Li family anymore?" Li Changzhen stared eagerly at Li Bin's bowl and nodded vigorously. Li Bin's face darkened. "The 3 of us were born not because of any fatherly or motherly love, but as children born naturally. According to the debt laws of the huge enterprises, we can be used as loan assets? Our parents took us to get loans as soon as we were born?" Li Changzhen continued to nod. Li Bin's face fell, and he still didn't give up hope. "There are 2,807 star coins left at home, but we owe more than 10,000 in total?" Li Bin's face fell, and he still didn't give up hope. "There are 2,807 star coins left at home, but we owe more than 10,000 in total?" Li Shu lowered her head, and even Li Changzhen was too embarrassed to look at Li Bin's bowl again. Damn it. Those 2 old things are better off dead. It turned out that the so-called parents didn't have any love for the 3 of them at all. Because of the marriage system in today's Perseus, even families had disappeared along with the domain of man. The common people were poor, so most families neither wanted nor could afford to have children. It didn't matter if the parents couldn't pay off the debts. The children could continue to pay them off. If they couldn't pay, they could sign a contract to become generational contract slave workers. Li Bin's parents in this life, because of poor management, came up with the idea of taking out loans using their children. They wanted to keep the factory running by constantly having children and taking out loans. But the huge enterprises weren't stupid either. When Li Changzhen also got saddled with loans, the huge enterprises judged that the risk of lending more money to the Li family was too great, so they stopped lending. Otherwise, when Li Bin came back this time, there might not just be a younger brother and sister, but a whole group of siblings. When the factory was completely on the verge of collapse, the huge enterprises took it away and held an auction. The factory, worth tens of thousands of star coins, was finally bought at a low price. Most of the funds were used to pay off the debts, and 2,807 star coins were left for Li Shu and Li Changzhen. I always wondered why I was doing a good job, but the Min Sheng company wouldn't sign a contract with me for a few more years and instead kicked me out. So it turns out they were only interested in the factory from the beginning. This also explained why a kid from the factory area like him, an 8-year-old brat, could become a crew member. The Min Sheng company wasn't a local enterprise. They took him in purely as a hostage. Now that they had the factory shares in hand, they naturally wanted to kick Li Bin out to prevent him from hating them and affecting the company's operations. Sarah should have really wanted to keep him. After all, his feud with the Min Sheng company had nothing to do with her. The losses were the company's, and the money he made from smuggling was his own. Li Shu put down her bowl. "When my younger brother was born, the factory was already having a hard time getting orders. I was already prepared for the bankruptcy liquidation, but I was a bit flustered when they gave us so many star coins. There are still so many debts." Li Shu hadn't touched a single cent of the money left from selling the factory. The money she and her younger brother spent on food and accommodation in the past few years was their hard-earned money. She didn't know how to spend this money to pay off the debts, and she was also afraid that if she spent the money, the other people in the industrial area would notice. Everyone here was poor, and they were very sensitive about spending. As long as someone spent money, others would figure it out after a while, and then there would be no peaceful days. Li Shu knew that her elder brother was precocious and had seen the world outside. She and her younger brother wouldn't spend this money. As soon as they got the money, they had made up their minds to wait for Li Bin to come back and make the decisions. Li Bin sneered. Don't think of the huge enterprises as good guys. This money isn't for us to spend. It's for us to use as capital to take risks. What's your monthly salary? What's the exchange rate between points and star coins now? Li Shu shook her head. It's all paid daily. I get 150 points a day. It takes about 13,000 points to exchange for 1 star coin. Working all year round, even if you don't take a day off, you'll only earn 4 star coins. You can't even pay the interest. And it's still in points. Are we playing a game here? Li Shu knew before that she couldn't pay off the debts, but she didn't dare to calculate it clearly, afraid that if she knew the truth, she wouldn't have the courage to live. After Li Bin's calculations, Li Shu felt even more desperate, and tears started to flow down. When Li Changzhen saw his sister crying, he was extremely worried. Sister, don't cry. Tell me who lent us the money. I'll go set their house on fire at night. If you hate those dead parents, I'll dig up their graves and feed their ashes to cockroaches, okay? You're not allowed to go. Li Shu glared at him, and Li Changzhen wilted. She looked down at her hands full of calluses and small scars. I just want to redeem the factory so that we don't have to work for others anymore. The whole family can be in charge of our own lives and live a good life. Brother, when those 2 people were taken away, I covered Changzhen's eyes. He didn't know, but I saw it clearly. It was really horrible. It seemed that Li Shu hated her parents to the extreme. She only referred to them as those 2 people. He comforted her, redeeming the factory is nothing. Individual refining factories have to kowtow to everyone. It's a job that even dogs wouldn't do. I'll give you a definite answer, sister. If we want to start a factory, it should be a shipbuilding factory with some technical content. But starting a factory isn't something that can be done overnight. We have to figure out a way to pay off the debts first, otherwise the interest will keep piling up. When Li Changzhen saw his elder brother start to speak, his sister immediately stopped crying. When he heard about paying off the debts, he immediately perked up. I've been looking for a long time. To make money, we still have to. Shut up and listen to your elder brother. Li Shu frowned. Oh. Li Changzhen wilted again. Li Bin said, I have 1,392 star coins on me, and there are 2,807 at home. Added together, it's 4,199 star coins. Let's round it up to 4,200. My idea is that we should buy a ship. There are many dangers in space, but there are also many opportunities. Whether it's exploring the ruins of the domain of man, picking up space junk, or installing mining equipment to mine asteroids, it will be more profitable than being a worker. Buy a ship? Li Shu was surprised. Is it enough? Of course not for a new ship. Li Bin laughed. But for a 7th or 8th hand one, there's a chance. Let's eat first. Tomorrow, follow me to look at the ship.